The Lakers are on the verge of a massive explosion. This roster could suddenly become a nightmare for every contender. But one desperate move could decide whether they dominate the NBA or completely collapse.
Like, the Lakers are just a worse team this year than they were last year or the year before. You're in the third year of the Luka Dončić era. This is your worst team of the 3 years.
It's not a very strong team at all. They got worse. Marcus Smart was wildly important to him. He's gone. And the second best player on the team's gone.
In NBA history, when have you seen your three most prominent players on a basketball team all be white? And that takes you to the promised land. Somebody got to say it, so I'm saying it.
But the real shock is still coming. The Lakers aren't simply searching for another player. They may be one desperate move away from completely changing the fate of this roster.
Taxpayer MLE, if it works that way. Or basically, if they don't land Kaminga, again, I haven't had my heart set on him, but I feel like it's got to be somebody. Like, how do you feel on that front?
It would be disappointing if you're the Lakers, obviously, because I still think they need that. There's just like a talent element here where the gap between Kaminga and if the bar is really like Jake LaRavia, Zaire Williams, Matisse Thybulle to start, there's just undeniably a gap there between Kaminga and those guys in terms of, I think, just most importantly, his ability to fill the role of what the Lakers need. And he does bring size, athleticism, rebounding, and a certain amount of defensive potential. Just that, like, those guys, they might check one or two of those boxes, but they can't check all those boxes to the same degree. And I think all those guys are more so bench players. But I would also say at the potential cost here of, like, if you could get Kaminga on a 3-year, $36-39 million sign-in trade where you're paying him $12-13 million over the next 3 years, I think it's a relatively team-friendly contract that I'd be open to. I think where I'm more concerned is if it starts getting closer to 50 million, 55, 60. But I mean, looking across the league, there's not many other options, right? Maybe Sadiq Bey or Najee Marshall are cheaper options, but then I don't really view either of those guys as a starter. So I'm almost like, either go get the starter or just stand pat. Like at this point, these, the half measures of, like, a better bench player or a better, but like that helps. But I think they need the starter. So to me, it's not Kaminga or bust, but it's maybe starter or bust, at least in the short term.
Totally agree with that, because I think the half measures, they've already taken them, right? Like, we've got a roster full of fours that are half measures if that's who you're starting. How do you feel about Cam Johnson?
I'd be open to him, especially with the context that he's expiring.
Yeah.
He doesn't check the defensive box for me. I think he's better defensively than people think, but to me, he's more of I would classify him as a slightly above average defender. And I ideally, like, I kind of have a general scale defensively of, like, average, above average, solid, good, great, elite. I would say he's somewhere that above average to solid range. I think the Lakers probably need at least a good defender, ideally, in that role. But based on if they can't get Kaminga, they can't get PJ Washington, Cam Johnson, I would take him over, like, the current group. I just think there's a gap there. What about you?
Yeah, I view him as a stopgap type of solution, but it is important to me that the forward next to Luka can guard on the perimeter, right? That he's not that. Obviously, Johnson's not that great defender at this point, but that is what he does for a living. He guards on the perimeter a lot more than, again, I want to keep Luka way more around the basket than being pulled out above the break. And so we talk a lot about the Lakers needing a 4, and I agree, but that 4 needs to have a degree of perimeter defensive capability, because Luka does not have that and is so much better in that low man defensive rebounder, can jump passing lanes. He's good on his closeouts and sort of like funneling to the baseline. He's got, using his chest to wall off drives and things like that. But once he gets out into space, that's when teams can sort of exploit that. And so, yeah, I do think that he's a step up. Johnson's a step up on that. And it would give the Lakers, it would buy them a little bit of time where you could still flip him at the deadline if you needed to. And yeah, I wonder if they kind of red paper clip it in that way where they sort of trade to make a future trade type of thing. But if they don't get that type of player, though, man, I think it has this knockoff effect on the rest of the roster that, if you're starting a Jake, you're starting Zaire, somebody like that, like, I don't know. I think that puts everybody in under a little more pressure.
I would agree. Like, I just think those are not guys that should be starting against I continue to hold this team to the standard of OKC, San Antonio, New York.
Yes.
That's the bar that they need to be competing with and clearing. And I just, if your version of Kason Wallace or Stephon Castle or Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges or whatever is Zaire Williams or Jake LaRavia, like that's just not a comparable comparison in my opinion. Yeah. But we'll see, right? Like we'll see where things go. The Lakers. I mean, imagine if they do it to
the Lakers, especially.
Lakers.
Yeah, and that just that in and of itself makes me skeptical that it could happen at all. But I do think they're one of the few teams that actually could use a 3-for-1 type of trade. That's exactly the opposite of Atlanta, right? Like they don't need two of our guys. They've already got too many guys. Like they're actually looking to fill out their rosters with guys who can play in an actual game, while also needing to re-sign Peyton Watson, while also staying under the second apron best they can. And so the way the cap rules are with the first apron, the Lakers being able to take back more salary, I think that if you gave them a couple of useful players in exchange for Johnson, they could still shed some salary, but not like totally lose all of the value there. So we'll see. That's about the best I can come up with as an alternative. I'm nervous that we're going to enter the season without a forward.
All right. Same guys. Ayton to Kessler. I think a major upgrade in the specific areas that the Lakers need: rebounding, rim protection, overall defense. Marcus and Rui, if we go with some version of Grimes, Jake, Grimes, Zaire, even Grimes Mamu, I think Marcus was better than Grimes last year, just straight up, and was better than him in the playoffs. Better than him definitely defensively overall. Rui, I guess if it's Mamu, we can have that debate. I think that's close. Rui versus Jake or Zaire, I think Rui's a better player. So I now we could like the fit, that's its own thing, right? And there's a component there. But I would actually argue, if you're looking at this specific starting group, the current starting group I think is arguably worse. But the depth of the team, I think, is like, I love the bench far better than the bench that they had in this game. And that's before even factoring in they could still add the Kaminga or PJ Washington, which then to me clearly tilts the current starting group into being a better starting group.
The Lakers may be staring at a roster problem that gets much uglier once the season begins. This is the third year of the Luka Dončić era, and the argument is brutal. This could actually be the weakest Lakers team of those 3 seasons. Marcus Smart is gone. Another major piece is gone. And suddenly, the margin for error around Luka looks dangerously thin. The Lakers don't simply need another body. They need a player who can change the structure of the starting lineup. Someone who can defend, rebound, run the floor, and absorb the physical burden that Luka cannot. Because if Los Angeles gets this wrong, the problem won't stay isolated to one position. And that is exactly why the conversation surrounding Jonathan Kuminga has become so important. Kuminga isn't perfect. That's not the argument. The argument is that he checks more boxes than almost anyone else realistically available. Size, athleticism, rebounding, defensive potential, and most importantly, the ability to start immediately. Compared with names like Jake Levine, Zaire Williams, or Matisse Thybulle, there is a clear talent and physicality gap. Those players may help the bench. Kuminga could potentially change the starting 5. And the proposed price is what makes this fascinating. A potential 3-year, $36–39 million sign-and trade, roughly $12–13 million per year. At that number, it's a gamble worth taking. But push that contract toward $50, $55, even $60 million, and suddenly the risk becomes much harder to justify. Because the Lakers aren't looking for another half measure. They're looking for the missing starter. And if Kaminga disappears from the board, the Lakers may have to consider a very different solution. Cam Johnson would be an upgrade, but nobody should pretend he's the final answer. Johnson brings perimeter defense, shooting, and size, and his expiring contract could give Los Angeles flexibility. The Lakers could theoretically acquire him now and still flip him at the trade deadline if the experiment doesn't work. That makes him useful. But there's a major problem. The Lakers need a good defender at that forward spot, ideally someone even better. Because Luka is most dangerous defensively when he's operating as a low man, using his size to rebound, jumping passing lanes, and protecting space near the basket. Pull him into space too often, and opposing teams can attack him. That's why the forward next to Luka can't simply be another scorer. He has to cover for Luka's weaknesses. Cam Johnson can help, but Kuminga could potentially transform the defense. And that difference is enormous. And this is where the Lakers' biggest fear comes into focus. What happens if they enter the season without solving that position? This is where the criticism gets uncomfortable. The Lakers already have a roster full of fours who feel like half measures. Adding another slightly better bench player doesn't suddenly turn them into Oklahoma City, San Antonio, or New York. Those are the standards. If the Lakers want to compete at that level, they need a starting forward who can actually survive against those teams. Otherwise, players like Zaire Williams or Jake LaVine could be pushed into starting roles they simply aren't built to handle. And that doesn't just hurt one position. It puts pressure on everybody. Luka has to create more. The defense becomes more fragile. Rebounding becomes more important. The bench loses its flexibility. One weak starter can create a chain reaction across the entire roster. That's why the real equation may not be Kuminga or bust. It may be much more dangerous. Starter or bust. And strangely enough, the Lakers may have one weapon that could allow them to fix the problem without completely sacrificing their depth. The Lakers are one of the few teams that could realistically explore a 3-for-1 type of trade. Instead of collecting more players, they could consolidate several useful pieces into one legitimate starter. That's the kind of move that changes a roster overnight. And if Cam Johnson becomes the target, Los Angeles could potentially use multiple players to make the numbers work while preserving future flexibility. The alternative is far more frightening. Standing pat, entering the season with a roster that looks deeper on paper but still lacks the one player capable of making the starting lineup dangerous. Because depth is valuable. But when you're chasing teams like Oklahoma City, San Antonio, and New York, top-end starting talent is what separates contenders from pretenders. And that is why the Lakers' next move could define the entire season before it even begins. Because right now, the Lakers aren't simply deciding who joins Luka. They're deciding whether this roster becomes a contender or slowly falls apart under its own weaknesses.
Yo, mic check 1 to 2, -1, -2. Game over for this video, folks. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to stay in the huddle for more. This is NFL Madness, bringing the heat and signing out.